All right, that was a good chat. All right, now we are live, officially live. So before we get back to our lively banter, we'll start with introductions. I'm Tim Maiden. I'm one of the editors, writers for Black Shoe Diaries, Penn State blog, and SB Nation. Clay, you want to introduce yourself?
I am Clay Sauertag, the deputy editor for Black Shoe Diaries, as well as a writer for the Gettysburg Times in Pennsylvania.
Ellie?
Hi, I'm Ellie Morata Felice. I am also an editor at Black Shoe Diaries.
Yep, thanks for joining me today, gentlemen. This is going to be our new weekly post-game show that we're doing up here on the Voice of College Football every Saturday at the end of every game. So obviously I had the schedule for 3:30, but I think those of you, I'm assuming all you are diehard fans, you understand with all the media timeouts and other BS that happens in games that almost never happens. So thanks for being patient. And I don't see a bunch of comments like, where's the video? I thought you guys were starting at 3:30. So 17 heart attacks. Yeah, I think I had twice as many jazz music. So I'm right there with you, bud. So I guess initial thoughts, fellas. I mean, those last two drives, I just had all the horrible memories of UVA in 2012, or even last year against Indiana, start to come back. I was almost certain that they were going to punch it in, and kick the game-winning extra point with very little time left for Penn State to go downfield and of course try like a 45-yard field goal, which, with Stout being what it was today, who knows what would have happened.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time, but first of all, you look to recruiting, and that translates into playmakers. And when you have a game like this where you're playing against Wisconsin on the road, they're going to be a good team. It's probably going to be a close game. You need one or two plays, and Penn State wasn't great, particularly offensively. Defense was great. But Penn State wasn't great throughout this one, but when they needed big plays, Jahan Dotson came up with a big play. Noah Kane came up with a big play. Jaquan Brisker came up with a big play. These are all guys that were really big recruiting wins and have translated into the plays that kind of separate games like this.
And let's give Wisconsin credit, right? Like, we all talk about Wisconsin's defense in passing. They're a good defense. But they're one of the best defenses in the Big Ten, if not the country, very consistently. So the fact that Penn State struggled to move the ball in the first half should not have been unexpected. However, the fact that they went into the half, made adjustments, and then were able to move the ball, even if they only score 16 points out of it, it's credit to Wisconsin, right? Mm-hmm. But also credit to Penn State's offense for making those adjustments.
It's funny. I don't know what Penn State ended up with in terms of the rushing totals. I don't know whether somebody has that in front of them. But I was working on my preview for the Gettysburg Times that came out Friday, and I mentioned that Wisconsin last year had one of the best run defenses in the country. They allowed, it was 95 yards per game, which is fifth best in the country. And I'm sitting there all for the first 2.5 quarters saying, why the hell can't Penn State run the ball? It turns out like Wisconsin's pretty good at stopping you from doing that. And obviously as Penn State hit some deep balls, as Penn State was able to stretch the defense, things opened up a bit for Noah Kane. But until you're able to do that, you're not going to be able to run on them. I don't care who you are.
No, we all, of course, Sean Clifford was the talk of all offseason. How much, if any, would he be improved working with Mike Yurcich, which obviously, as we all know, is third coordinator in as many years being the starter. The beginning, it looked rather shaky, but then, second half, I don't know about you, but it seemed like Yurcich made some real adjustments. He realized that to beat Wisconsin, at least get the ball moving on Wisconsin's defense, you got to, work the edges, utilize your athletes to try to outrun them with little screen passes and then take the occasional deep shot at Jahan, which, worked quite well a few times during the game.
Yeah, I think Penn State, what really we saw throughout is not only is Jahan Dotson a threat, but there were some big plays by Parker Washington throughout the game. who I think ended up with a few catches. Keandre Lambert-Smith was open. And I think Clifford, those guys just being competent enough to be able to make plays is going to open things up throughout. I think Clifford had more than 200 yards in the first half. Or in the second half.
247. You see the ticker on the bottom.
247 in the game. I think it was 200 plus in the second half alone.
Oh yeah, they had like 43 yards of offense in the first half. Something ridiculous.
I think as they develop, we don't need. I mean, it would be nice for Sean Clifford to be an All Big Ten level or an All American level, but the reality is that's not likely. And Penn State doesn't need it to be a good team. They just need somewhere around 2019 Sean Clifford, who was a better than average Power 5 quarterback.
To answer the question about rushing yards, 50. They had 50 rushing yards for the game.
I think that was after -1 or something in the first half, or though.
Yeah. Oh. Which, you know, if we
48 50.
If we
that's the other thing
play
too,
that takeaway game too, right? Like there were so many negative yardage plays in the first half that, you know, maybe that number looks a little better. But as we mentioned earlier, right, this is Wisconsin's bread and butter. They're going to stop the run, and it's great that one of the pieces on the passing stats that I personally enjoyed is 0 interceptions by Clifford, which was the big problem at the beginning of last season. And if he can continue to do just that, which is basically what you're alluding to, right, Clay, is if he could continue to be decent, he doesn't need to be extraordinary. Just don't throw interceptions, don't give the ball away, and you put yourself in positions to win games like this one.
I mean, barring health, if Penn State scores 28 points a game, how many wins do you think they finish the season with in the regular season? You give them 28 points a game.
Give Penn State 20. I'd
28,
say
28 points a game. 4 touchdowns.
Off the top of my head, I think they can win at least 9, if not 10. At least if the defense plays like they did today all season long.
I mean, Wisconsin's offense is not exactly a shining star. And I think Graham Mertz is probably one of the lesser quarterbacks in the Big Ten. But the Badgers rushed for 3.1 yards per carry on, what was it, 58 rushes in this game and 3.1 yards per carry. They had, I think their longest carry, looking at it now, was 19. No big plays in the passing game. The secondary was everything it was chalked up to be. Jesse Luketa, who's been switching between linebacker and defensive end, was immense. Ellis Brooks played the best game that I think he's played in a Penn State jersey. It was very, very clear that Arnold Ebiketie is going to be an impact maker if he's healthy. One of the more twitchy defensive ends I've seen at Penn State in a long time. I'd say he's every bit as twitchy as Jason Noah was this year or last year. This defense really on all 3 levels was really, really strong. And I thought it could be good, but I wasn't expecting that performance in the defensive line that I thought was fantastic today.
I'll say I was very
about the 28 points a game question.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm going to repeat myself here, but like Wisconsin's defense is really good. I'm not sure that Penn State scores 16 points if their opening game would have been Ball State, for example.
Right. I would hope not.
Right.
Then we'd be in trouble.
What I wanted to give a shout out to as well is Jaquan Brisker. I mean, he went out 3 separate times during the game with cramps or injuries, whatever. But man, when he was back in the second half, he came up with not only some clutch tackles to prevent big runs, but I mean, he came up with a huge interception, on Wisconsin's second to last drive when, they were threatening in the red zone.
Yeah, and Penn State recently has had some good safeties. You look at Marcus Allen, I thought was really good. Nick Scott, even when he was back there, I thought was pretty good. Jaquan Brisker is the first safety that I can remember in a long time for Penn State that can do it all. He's more than capable in coverage. He can come up around the line of scrimmage. He's a very good blitzer. When the ball's in the air, he's fantastic at high pointing the ball, which we saw. He's not afraid to shed some blocks and get after it. That skill set, and really if he plays that level, you're looking at a first-round NFL draft pick level player.
Oh, no doubt. He's at the very least an early second round guy right now. But he can, if he lights it up like he did today, throughout the season, I could see him shooting up into a late first rounder.
And how much of this game would you guys say? I mean, obviously you talk about just winning, but was going into just saying, I don't care how Penn State wins, and I don't think Penn State care how they win. Just get out of Camp Randall in week 1 with a win. And now you're looking at a season that shapes up. Obviously, you have Auburn coming up. You got some tough games with Indiana and Iowa early, but you do get that initial curtain raiser with Ball State where you can kind of maybe work some things out and hopefully build some confidence in that game before getting into the meat of the schedule.
Right. Now,
After,
of course, go ahead, Ellie.
I was going to say, after the heartbreakers that Penn State has had, not just in season openers, but in Big Ten openers and in just close games that, in fairness, about half and half go in their favor. But like after the gut wrenchers, heartbreakers that they've gone through, I think being almost on the end of another one, but pulling it out is going to do tremendous to lift the spirits of the team, but also to like all of that talk at the beginning of the camp and all through the off season. Like this is the prove it point, and they proved it, and now they believe it. It's not just talk; it's like it happened.
Well, you make a good point, Ellie, because I remember this whole past week. You have the quotes from Sean Clifford during media days saying, "I'm the most confident quarterback in the country." You got other. I know we all laugh at that, but it was quotes also from Jahan Dotson, from Jaquan Brisker. I mean, each of them just sounded so sure of themselves. Like the common theme around them was that this team had a chip on its shoulder, that this locker room was united, that they were ready to go prove some doubters wrong. And I mean, it was dicey at times today, but you know what? When they absolutely had to come up with each play, they did. And this is a huge booster, like
the big thing for me was it wasn't. We mentioned the guys who made the plays to kind of swing the game, but really throughout, especially in the first half when the defense was remarkable, I thought, to keep Penn State in that game and give it a chance. It wasn't just Ebiketie and Brisker. It was also Brooks. Brandon Smith had some plays.
Yeah.
Joey Porter Jr., I thought, had a fantastic game. The defensive interior was brilliant. PJ Mustipher and Derek Tangelo, I thought, were outstanding. Jair Brown obviously had the big interception to seal it, but somebody mentioned in our Slack chat on Black Shoe Diaries how he had a quiet game. And I mean, anytime my safeties aren't getting called, I'm happy about it. Generally, the only time you hear the name of a safety is if they're making an interception or if they're getting burnt. And really, the entire secondary,
interceptions.
I thought was quiet. On all three levels, Penn State, I thought, was fantastic defensively. Nick Tarburton, I thought was better than I ever would have imagined for his first start at defensive end, or his first time at defensive end. Lucetta, we mentioned earlier, had to move back to linebacker when Brooks got thrown out and made 3 or 4 huge plays. We saw they showed the replay of the one where he jumped and made Mertz throw high. He got into the backfield for a tackle for loss. I mean, the ability to balance both of those positions and play them both well against a team that's this talented and this well coached in Wisconsin was. I really take my hat off to Jesse Lucetta.
Indeed, I mean, him and Ellis Brooks, who both had rough seasons last year, for them to come out and perform the way they did this year, I mean, that also showed you just how much this defense has turned a corner. And maybe it shows that, hey, it certainly makes a difference when you have a more normal offseason that isn't screwed up by a global pandemic.
And the other thing that the defense did well is that they didn't stop them completely, but they adjusted in the second half to the run game as well. Wisconsin had, I think it was 21 something time of possession in the first half, and I'm not looking at the stat right now, but I'm pretty sure that in the second half that was a lot more even. And that's because the Lions actually stopped Wisconsin on the run.
I think there was definitely adjustments made, both defensively in terms of making Graham Mertz be a passer, which, as we saw, he struggled a bit with, and particularly offensively. You'd like to think that wouldn't be that tough to tell Penn State to get outside against Wisconsin when they succeed. But I will give Mike Yurcich a ton of credit for realizing when something isn't working and getting away from it. And not only did those little slip screens and those swings and those short passes work in the passing game, but as Wisconsin kind of had to play those things, Noah Cain found a lot more space in the interior, particularly in that fourth quarter. So I really think the adjustments by Yurcich were huge, and getting in rhythm we saw was gigantic for Sean Clifford.
No doubt. And you mentioned Noah Cain. The run, for the first 3 quarters, I mean, the running game was non-existent. Cain got stuffed early. Kevon Lee, tried to do his best Saquon Barkley impression and failed miserably a couple times, trying to bounce off guys and then getting tackled for a 5-yard loss. Hopefully he can just chalk that up. Maybe it's just a rough game for him and he bounces back next week. But, Noah Cain, though, coming in the fourth quarter and, starting to plow through that defense and also, catch a couple swing passes from Cliff to move the chains. It was good. It was good to see him, play a key role once again. And I think most importantly, he stayed healthy, at least for one game. I mean, I hope it stays that way for the entire season because I really want him to, yes, fingers crossed, double fingers crossed, that he stays healthy this entire season. I think he can be really special for us. But outside of that, I think we have one carry from Devin Ford. But as far as a running back rotation, I mean that's one group that got a ton of hype coming into this season. How do you guys feel about the group now? One game in, do you feel worse? Feel better? About the same?
I don't know that it
changes
too much for me. Yeah, I'm with Ellie on that one. I think we all thought that Cain should be the number 1 back, and he showed it there towards the end of the game. Wisconsin obviously committed to stop the run, and when they do that, they're pretty much going to stop the run against anybody in the country, bar a handful of teams. The offensive line seemed to find some continuity there. I think Eric Wilson played the entirety of the second half at left guard from what I can recall, and that seemed to really settle down. He and Rasheed Walker on the left-hand side. Let's see where John Lovett fits in there. If John Lovett fits in there, obviously did not travel in this one. We didn't see Keziah Holmes. But I think it's just going to be a matter of getting a little bit of rhythm and getting a little bit of flow, and I think that's something that they hopefully should be able to do next week against Ball State.
And I will say that we like Saquon Barkley a bit. We remember the circus plays, and for Lee, right, the juggling around in the backfield for a loss is what sticks out. But he actually was consistent given the circumstances when he wasn't trying to avoid defenders. So, and ultimately, right, like Penn State cannot put all of their eggs in the Noah Cain basket, not because Noah Cain can't handle it, but because Penn State wants to have more than one back in order to be able to keep them fresh and wear teams down late in the game. And actually, this is kind of what ended up happening, even if not in the way we would have hoped. But it's Noah Cain came in the fourth quarter and he started making plays. But that was only possible because Noah Cain was rested. Had he not been, maybe things turn out a little bit different.
Yeah, I think we got to remember, too, that Lee is a true sophomore who didn't really have a full season last year, got thrown into pretty much a starting running back role by the end of the year. And while we've seen young running backs come in, I think it's one of the easier positions, I would say, to make transition. It's still not easy by any means. So I think that's something where you get in the film room, you get with Jawan Sider, who's one of the better running back coaches in the country, and maybe you work that out of it and you say, hey, sometimes you take 4 yards, sometimes you take 2 yards. If you keep taking what's there, you're going to get you're going to bust one eventually. And that's what we really, I think, part of what has made Kane so successful is that he's always been the type to take what is given.
No doubt.
As a side note, in scores of other games, Fresno State and Oregon are tied at 21.
What channel?
Pac-12 networks. 549.
So nobody's going to see it.
Pac-12.
Joe Moorhead should try coordinating the defense as well. It might work a little better.
Yeah.
So what do we think overall? We had what? Penn State had three new position coaches this year. In Ty Howell, in Mike Yursich, who's not really a position coach, more of a coordinator, and in Anthony Poindexter. And I would say all three of those position groups played pretty well. Even the tight ends that didn't have gaudy numbers, I thought blocked for the most part really well and made the best of the limited opportunities that they did have.
Certainly.
And
I mean,
having a former offensive lineman coaching you as a tight end probably does wonders in the blocking department.
Right.
No doubt. But I think the safeties, like you mentioned, Poindexter, I don't know if you've seen any of the videos, introductory videos in the offseason during practices, but he's a pretty intense guy. And I like the most vocal guy amongst the defensive coaches, similar to what Sean Spencer was when he was coaching the D-line here. And I think it rubbed off, it seems, on the play of the safeties. They seem to show that killer instinct, going after the ball and, going for the takeaways.
And
trying to remember the last time we came up with such a clutch interception late in the game. It seems like we drop those things or we're not able to quite get there.
Almost all the time. And Brown is a guy who was kind of known for that in junior college. And I think I would include myself in this group. I think some people that pay attention may have soured on him a bit last year without really thinking about the fact that, again, he was in the same situation that most of the freshmen were, where not only is he coming in without an offseason from Lackawanna College, but he was thrown very quickly into the rotation. And I think a full offseason has done wonders for him. We'll see how the season progresses. Obviously, it's early. But a full offseason seems to have done wonders for him. And the relationship with he and Brisker, who were teammates for a season at Lackawanna, seems to be really, really good in terms of communication and how they work together.
And I will say, right, like the two interceptions at the end were great, but after dropping like 5 of them earlier in the game, eventually they were going to catch some of these. And it just so happens that they caught the 2 that mattered the most.
Yeah, and really, I mean, one of the things that Penn State talked about under Joe Moorhead, but obviously under Brent Pryden on defense as well, was for Joe Moorhead, it was explosive plays, and that's something that Yursich talks about. And Penn State had, I have to count the number, but probably I think 3 receptions at least of 20-plus yards. And then on defense, it's about making big plays, making momentum swinging plays. And I would include the special teams in that with the block kick, the 2 interceptions, some sacks. The defense was not just great in terms of keeping Wisconsin off the scoreboard, but in terms of swinging momentum at a time where things could have gotten really bad for Penn State.
Well, certainly. I mean, I remember the first, we're going into halftime and the scores. I'm thinking to myself, Wisconsin should probably be up 14-0 with the way they've dominated time possession and with the opportunities they have. But, I think the defense, they lived up to the whole bend but don't suck motto. I mean, Tom Browden would probably got a tear in his eye watching that game today, because they bent like hell, but they did not break. I mean, like you mentioned, the blocked field goal and then recovering a fumble in the red zone. I mean, that's at least like, a couple field goals you're wiping off there.
The only gripe that I could have with Brent Pryden the entire game was the prevent defense that he quickly got out of. And the moment he got out of, Penn State created pressure on Mertz, and Mertz struggled. We saw 3 plays where they were just like, we're going to let you just sit back there and throw. And it went about as badly as you could imagine. And thankfully, Pry switched that up. And as soon as he did, they got right back on track.
Yeah, and another point on that is that last season, right, we gripe about the defense, rightfully so.
Mm.
But the defense was asked to basically make miracles at times.
Mm.
But when they're not in a position where they have to have a miracle in order to just keep up, right? Then those big plays actually make a difference. And that's also a testament on the offense just not stinking at all over the place, at least in the second half.
Right. And speaking of offense, I don't think we've touched yet on the offensive line. I guess we can say mixed bag today. At times, they were confident. At other times, they were getting bullied by that Badger front seven. But I guess they held up when they needed to.
If we pretend that the first half didn't exist, they were great. The second half, they put up 250 yards. The second half, they moved the ball up and down the field. Obviously, I think they only scored the 9 points, but a lot of that had to do with the ball control of Wisconsin and limiting possessions. But the second half, Penn State's offense pretty much raced up and down the field. So if they want to keep doing that for the next 14 and a half games, 15 no or bust, that'd be outstanding.
Question for you both.
Mm-hmm.
In the rest of the way, which defensive front outside of Ohio State's can match what Wisconsin did today to Penn State's offensive line?
Tim,
I would have to take a look at this. I mean, I guess off the top of my head, I'm watching this Iowa-Indiana game.
That's the one. That's the one that scares me.
I would think Iowa could be a problem. Indiana maybe to a lesser extent, but Iowa especially has a tendency to churn out some quality D lines. They and Wisconsin are basically like, they're like mirror images of each other practically, except Wisconsin, maybe they have better quarterback play overall. Well, I guess it's a toss up.
Wisconsin has a little bit more athletes just across the field.
But they're a little more athletic than Iowa, but it's not. I mean, it's not a huge difference.
Another team that kind of comes to mind, and I'll have to watch some more, but I feel like Michigan fans should be really excited after today. And obviously they should beat Western Michigan fairly comfortably, but there's been a lot of games in the last few years where they should beat teams comfortably, and that hasn't happened. And I don't think that their quarterback back there is the end-all, be-all. But I kind of think that maybe the Wolverines, and we'll see how the season progresses, could benefit from starting the season off the radar.
Well, certainly. I mean,
absolutely.
At least, of course, they took, like I said, they took care of business against, Western Michigan's no slouch. I mean, they were a pretty decent team last year. I think I read they returned the most consistent quarterback from last year in terms of completion percentage. Don't quote me on that one, but see, I was looking at the stats real quick. Kate McNamara, 9 for 11, 136 yards, 2 TDs. JJ McCarthy got some action, threw a touchdown. The run game is.
They ran the ball for 334 yards. Oof.
Now, of course, they'll have a little bit harder time against, certain Big Ten defenses. But although I think they did lose Ronnie Bell to a
bad leg injury.
So that we'll see how that affects them going forward. They did have
in fact
touchdown for them.
We'll find out very quickly because they play Washington next week.
Very true. Yeah. And even before today, I mean, just maybe it's because John Donovan's coaching is the offensive coordinator for Washington, and we've all experienced the horrors of a John Donovan coached offense. So even before today, I would have told you Michigan's going to win, and then of course after today, I'd probably be more confident in that pick.
All right, guys. Well, I hate to cut out on you here quickly, but I have got a family obligation to you too. Penn State fans, I appreciate you joining me. I will obviously be with you guys throughout the week on Black Shoe Diaries.
All right.
Thanks for tuning in.
Yep. Later, everyone.